Hey there, I'm Sarah Zarella, a portrait and wedding photographer and your host for Wedding Secrets Unveiled. This is a podcast where we cut through the complexity of wedding planning, leaving you with everything you need to know directly from the industry experts. If you want to simplify your wedding planning while having fun, of course, you came to the right place. Join me while I guide you through your planning, starting from your engagement to your big day where you say, I do. After photographing for the past 19 years, I am sharing with you tips and tricks to cut through the excess noise because I believe from the moment you said yes, your planning experience should be a magical time in your life. Here you will find episodes that are fun, stress-free, and straight to the point with a fresh, honest take on the reality of what you really need to know about planning your perfect day. Let's dive in. Well, welcome back to Wedding Secrets Unveiled podcast, friends. So today we're going to talk a little bit about some practical stuff when it comes to florals. Did you know that there's a difference between a florist, a floral designer, and a floral farmer? Today on our podcast, we're going to have Mia. She's the owner, founder, and grower of Millie's Flower Farm. We're going to talk a little bit about budget. We're going to talk about trends and styles, questions to ask your florist designer, and also questions to ask your floral farmer. We're going to talk about the differences, and we're also going to just share some stories. So sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Mia as she educates you all a little bit about the floral farming industry. Welcome back to Wedding Secrets Unveiled podcast, friends. So, Mia, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited. I cannot wait for the listeners to meet you. We have been friends for quite a bit of time, and I'm excited to share with my listeners you. And with that said, can you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are, who you serve, and what you do in your business?
Sure. So who am I? My name is Mia. I'm from Rhode Island, Coventry to be exact. My family has been in the floral industry since 1875, believe it or not. Started with my grandparents, owned greenhouses in Quidnick, Rhode Island. We owned 2 flower shops. My family has 2 flower shops in Rhode Island. And when the pandemic came around, we noticed that shipping costs went up. Everything was going up. We couldn't getting florals from Holland and getting shipments. Everything was stopped. Everyone knows that. Everything was completely stopped. So growers, fertilizer was going up. Shipping problems were happening. And I own a plot of land with my family. And I decided that, you know what? I'm going to start to grow our own florals as much as we can. So with that being said, I made my significant other crazy, and we cleared about 1.5 acres of land, and I started growing florals, and I'm doing it mostly for weddings and events. I also supply to our flower shops and a few local florists. I do zinnias, dahlias, snapdragons, ranunculus, tulips. I mean, anything that will grow in this climate, I'm growing. And it's been taking off. It's a lot of work, but the blooms are amazing. And I've noticed that people booking their weddings are actually reaching out to me to grab flower farm flowers versus them going to florists and having florists do it. They're looking for those local blooms, and they seem to be enjoying it. So that's what I've been up to.
Yeah, and you're not kidding that you literally just started like plowing down a field. So for our listeners, Mia, yes, she has been in the floral industry for years, but we are also friends and also industry friends. And I mean, not kidding, like she would send me texts, like she's there with her bulldozer. I mean, just down the fields, and I'm like, Mia, what are you doing? And you're like, Sarah, I'm gonna have a flower field. Like, I'm gonna grow flowers. And here you are.
I know. The funny thing is, too, is that I think everyone thought I was nuts because
Well, you are, but that's okay.
Well, I am nuts, but I think that everyone, when I first said it, they, when I say I'm going to do something, I pretty much do it. And I've already made up my mind in my head, so there's really no going back. But people, I mean, as much as people know me, I swear they just don't know me. So when I said, no, that's what I'm doing. And next thing you know, I had to cut down what I have to cut down, like 100 trees. I had to cut down probably about 100 trees. Plus I had to get, we cut down probably about 100 trees, plus I had to get a big skid steer and commercial excavation. And I mean, it's been a whole undertaking. I mean, and not to mention I had to get dump trucks full of compost and soil, because people think that you could just cut down trees and then there you go and just grow on the grass, which I kind of in the beginning was like, oh, maybe that's all I can do, not realizing how much of an investment goes into versus seed, but just to prep your soil for this. But the good thing is I had a really successful year. I did really well. The flowers were amazing. And this year I have so many things planned, which was going back to weddings, seeing I booked some weddings already. If it's enough notice, I was able to grow varieties for certain brides for their certain color combinations. So if it's a wedding that comes in, that's a year out, and they say, I want a special color specific for me, I'm able to grow it. Now, the great thing too is seeing I am in the flower industry. I can get flowers because God forbid a tornado comes floating around or a hurricane and it wipes out the crop season. Some flower farms don't have that luxury, where I am also able to, I always tell my brides, don't panic, because even if bad weather happens, because you can't judge Mother Nature. So if something happened that's horrific, you're still covered. So you'll still be able to get the flowers, which is a plus for people.
Yes, and all joking aside, COVID definitely pivoted a lot of businesses, and like you said, you and your family have been in the floral industry for decades. But yes, you had to plow down a whole field and start your flower farm, which is now Millie's flower farm. But you had an idea and you made it reality. But with that said, it makes sense. COVID really pivoted a lot of businesses, and in the wedding industry and the floral industry, the crops and the florals, shipping hot, your roses. People don't realize where their flowers are coming from. They're coming from all over Holland, Costa Rica. I mean, they're coming in from, they're not locally grown usually. They're coming in from other countries. And, a lot of people don't realize that. And a lot of brides will come in and they'll say, they want a Vogue wedding on a Walmart budget. Right. And sometimes that's a problem, because the reality is that flowers are not cheap. And I will tell you, just even for me doing what I'm doing right now, I've always known the cost of flowers, obviously, but for what it's taken me to grow these flowers, I'm realizing, like, you don't realize how much goes into it to get a crop of flowers, and how much fertilizer is, how much the compost is, how much, you have to, I try to use all organic too. So it's so bug repellent, all organic. People don't realize it. So, some people don't have a realistic idea when they go in and they want to go into your florist. When they're budgeting for their wedding, I always say, what is your budget for flowers? And some people, they'll be like, oh, well, I didn't think about that. So that leads into my first question. We let our listeners know a little bit about how Millie's Flower Farm came about, but let's talk about budget. Talk with me about what's a realistic budget, and let's go over that for our listeners.
But what's a realistic budget depends on the person, really, because I won't take a a floral job under 2,500. I didn't start growing flowers because I want to do backyard mason jar flowers. You can grab those at Stop and Shop. Depending, it really realistically, I mean, to start a wedding, it depends on. First of all, start like because you take photos and what the costs are for you to take professional photos. But you also have to think about every budget is different. It depends on how many guests. So that goes down to how many are you going to have? Are you going to have round tables, 10 at a table? How many guests? How many tables do we need? Do we need flowers for the altar? Do we need flowers for your wedding party? Do you need flowers for the mother of the bride, the father of the bride, the flower girl? Do you want any installations? Do you want any arbors decorated? How elaborate do you want your arbor decorated? A full arbor that you see in these big magazines, you're looking at like $5,000, fully stocked. Now you can make adjustments to that and do flowers on, a spray on one side and a spray on the other. But some girls and women will come and say, "Oh, I saw that flower install." You're not realizing how many flowers are actually in that to fill that whole arbor. They're not really thinking. They're just saying, "Oh, I see that. It's beautiful and I want that." Okay, well, do you know how many roses are in that?
So so for our listeners, you're saying that at least with you, that a minimum would be 25,000 and
2,500.
Sorry, 2,500. So yeah, I was gonna say 25,000. Sorry,
2,500.
Yeah, right. Hey, there you go. So a minimum is 2,500. But so for a lot of our listeners, they've never done this before, so they don't know what a realistic budget is. So walk us through a little bit about how you handle that end when you're first initially talking to somebody.
Well, my first initial conversation is to get to know them and ask them exactly what it is that they have for a budget. Sometimes they say, "Oh, I don't know. What do you think?" Well, what do I think? I'm not sure yet. So let's talk about, again, like I said, let's talk about how many guests are you having? 10 tables. Okay. What kind of flowers do you like? Because do you want a flower full of carnations? Do you want peonies? Because each flower has a different cost. Peonies are expensive. Carnations are cheap.
So obviously, if somebody comes to you and they say, "Listen, Mia, I have this for what I set aside for my budget," you can make that realistic by saying that to them, "Okay, these flowers."
Right. Then we adjust it and say, you can have some larkspur. You can, change it up. You can have some zinnias, gorgeous zinnias, and mixed in with a couple roses. I mean, because there's so many things that you can do, and people don't realize that. They'll just come to me and say, "Oh, I see this picture, and this is what I want." Okay, well, your budget might not suit that, but we could, maybe supplement with some zinnias, which are gorgeous, but they're less expensive than a rose or a peony.
And then also too, if they're local to the area, obviously they can speak with you. But if they're not local, they can search out their other floral farms, because one of the things you said earlier, which is great, is that especially if you are working with someone who is talking with you in advance, you can actually start to grow their flowers of choice.
Right. But the thing with that is I don't think a lot of flower farms, now I'm a grower designer. A lot of flower farms aren't grower designers. Because being a florist and being a designer is completely different than being a flower farmer. I happen to be lucky because I'm already a florist who just took on growing. Where a lot of people they don't have the time, so you're not going to get every flower farm to be a designer for you. They could probably sell you buckets of flowers, I do sell buckets of flowers for some weddings. So I have actually 2 people this year that are going to buy buckets of florals because they want to do the arrangements themselves. So they said, can you give us buckets of blooms? Absolutely. So I'll give them the color coordinates that they want, and I'm going to sell them buckets of flowers for them to put together their own arrangements. Now, that's up to them on how those arrangements come out. It could be a complete nightmare, but that's up to them. So, but I can give you the flowers, and you can grow your own. You can put together your own arrangements as well. Um, so that's an option for some people as well. So if you have mason jars that you want put together and you have a small backyard wedding, I can sell you the buckets of flowers, and you're just going to be the one putting them in the mason jars. I'm just not arranging them for you in a mason jar. So it's not like I won't sell any flowers to you. I absolutely will. I just that's not where I'm at.
It's just like you said, it's two totally different situations that you actually can do both.
Right.
Going back to pricing now, I want you to, give me the skinny on the situation of centerpieces. Tell me, is it really less expensive to get smaller centerpieces? Because I hear that a lot out there.
Again, that depends on the flower that you choose, because people don't understand. Because I could build you a bigger centerpiece with carnations and zinnias and some stock versus you getting into dahlias and peonies. Dahlias are an expensive flower. If you go to even a flower farm, they're selling them at $5 a stem.
So it's not about what people see in pictures, the size. It's actually the actual flower going in it. I got a question for you. What about greenery?
Greenery isn't so bad. I mean, greenery really isn't really high. That eucalyptus can be pricey, but like leather leaf and ruckus and all of that. I mean, that's really not that's not really where your costs are. Your costs are kind of in the blooms, but it depends though, because if you told me to do a garland of eucalyptus, now you're talking about time, because now I have to twine a whole garland for each and every table. Now you're putting in my time on top of the eucalyptus cost, because some people see, you'll see those garlands across the tables that have hurricane lights between them and floral stuck in. They don't realize that. I just hand tied a couple cases of garland for you.
Well, and I think that comes to my other question is a lot of our listeners right now, some people might know the vocabulary that you're saying. And so they're probably nodding their heads and being like, okay, this makes sense. So these flowers are this expensive and these flowers are that expensive, because terminology for them, they might understand the floral vocabulary. But what about the people who don't understand the floral vocabulary? What happens? I mean, if they don't know what they want, where do they even begin with you to even understand?
Well, that's where I would come in and I would show them an example and show them the flower and say this would be a substitution, and show them another flower, because I understand no one knows our lingo, and I know they don't know the flower I'm talking about.
So
if they didn't know what a zinnia is, I would say, you could get this look with this zinnia, with this flower, which is a less expensive flower. Your guests don't know it's a less expensive flower. No one knows. And a lot of times why I'm saying it's a less expensive is because a lot of flowers are very long. They take a long grow time, and they take 120 days versus some that will take 60. So they have to babysit. We have to babysit those florals.
And some of them actually have a smaller blooming season, I would assume. So
that's the other thing. Peonies, right? They have a smaller blooming. I always go back to peonies because that's one that everyone always seems to love. Sometimes peonies, ranunculus. They're a smaller bloom, which is actually, they'll stop popping this season, this spring, early spring, and they'll last until it gets very hot in the summer, until the hot season comes. People don't understand. Sometimes a ranunculus, it doesn't necessarily look like a peony, but sometimes it gives you that peony look. And sometimes roses, I have a trick where you can actually make a rose look like a peony. So there's certain things that you can do. So I guess the conversation with the person is, I'll say, look, Sarah, what's your budget? Like, what realistically have you put down for your budget? And then we can go from there and say, okay, well, what is it that you want to do? And a lot of brides that I speak to, they understand once you explain. I mean, they get it. I mean, you're buying, some people are spending $1,000 on a dress or even more. You're getting it. You want great pictures, you're paying for photography. You want a great wedding dress, you're paying for a wedding dress. It's the same thing when it comes to the florals or your food. And it's not that they're jacking up the price just because you're getting married. A lot goes into florals. A lot goes into the care of growing those flowers. And you are going to hire a designer that's going to work with you and that knows what your style is and that can do the job for you, because now you have their time. I'll put it this way. If you go get your hair cut, you're going to spend a lot of money to get your hair highlighted and cut. And you're going to a good hairdresser, a good stylist, versus if you're going to go to Bowericks, not saying that they're not doing a good job, but you know that the person who is giving you a higher end cut, you're basically paying for their talent, and you're paying for their time and the quality of products. Versus, and I'm not saying no one in Bowericks does a good job. I mean, there's a lot of good stylists out there at Bowericks, but you see where I'm going with that?
Yeah, what I was thinking also too, Mia, before we take our break, is what about the couples that, obviously like you talk about, like they're paying for their talent. So for you, you're sitting there and you're doing multiple things. You're growing, you can supplement, and you also design, right? So like, what about the couples that say to you, and so you also talked about how like you can make a rose look like a peony. But what about a couple who says to you that they want a certain flower, right? But it's not in season. Is there a way to make a flower, like get a flower in, or is that just that's just like a no?
It is, but you know what? I advise highly against that, because you're going to pay very, very high end for that. Because now you go to the greenhouses, you're I mean, depending on your budget, again, I mean, if you're dead set on that flower, sure. And if you want to, but there's a lot of other gorgeous flowers that you can supplement that, to go out there and grab that flower. I mean, because there is greenhouses all across the world that are growing flowers all the time, but some flowers just aren't in season. They're just not in season. So it depends on what it is. Tulips, you can usually get tulips all the time.
Totally makes sense. So, what we'll do, Mia, is let's take a quick break. And then when we get back, what we should do for our listeners is let's get it into a little bit of like why a flower farmer is different than, a florist, or should be your florist versus not. And let's go into a little bit about time when people should book their florist. And I would love to talk a little bit about some tips and tricks that you have for our listeners. I appreciate you being here. And hey, if you like what you're hearing, I encourage you to check out our website at sarahzarella.com. And don't forget, you can actually subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. And I would so appreciate if you left a fabulous review on Apple Podcast. Even better, share it with a friend. It's a great way to show your support. And now, let's get back to the episode. Well, welcome back to Wedding Secrets Unveiled podcast, friends. So before the break, we were talking with Mia about how she started her Millie's Flower Farm. She is a floral farmer and also a floral designer. We talked a little bit about budget, Mia. We went over a little bit about flowers and how that can affect pricing. But now I really kind of want to get into what sets you apart being a floral farmer, being a florist and a designer. Break it down for us.
So the difference is that I'm able to grow if you give me enough notice, like a year's notice. If I'm able to grow varieties of flowers in your color combinations for you for your wedding, hopefully if you're getting married in the right season, I mean, for them to be bloom time. So if you wanted dahlias of a certain color and you tell me a year ahead of time, dahlias come out probably around July and last until November, the first frost. Once the first frost hits, they're gone. But there's cafe au lait are a huge dahlia type that people just absolutely love, is cafe au lait. So I'm able to grow cafe au lait anyway. But if it was a color that you're specifically must have, I'm able to grow that for you specifically. That's one of the differences.
And I would
The flowers
assume,
that you, what?
I was going to say, and I would assume that's why they shouldn't wait so long to book their florist, because this is one of the benefits.
Yeah, I wouldn't wait to book your florist. No, no, I don't think anyone should wait to book their florist. I think that because especially people aren't realizing on how many calls I've been getting for weddings right now. Your florist can only take so many, and especially if it's a big wedding. I don't take any other weddings. I don't do two weddings a day. I'll only do one specific wedding that day, and I'm dedicated to you for delivery, because now don't forget, I also have to go and set up. I also have to deliver your flowers. We also have to think, and the other thing we haven't talked about is rentals. If you want a riser for your florals, we have to rent those risers. I don't carry them in stock because I just don't have the facility to carry all this stock. So you have to put in for a rental.
That's a great tip, by the way. That's a great tip for our listeners. I guess every florist is different, but like you said, you can only speak about how you work and some people that but so there's things that you don't realize that, yeah, maybe a florist can't do, multiple weddings a day. Some people can, but there's also other things that go involved, which is the flower stock and also to your rentals.
Right, the rental, but also people don't think about it's funny because I'll ask, well, what do you want your flower arrangements in? And that always stumps the bride. They're like, oh, I didn't even think about that. Well, we have to put them in something. So now you have to think ahead. Again, I'm going to go back to shipping and COVID and manufacturing and how we took a back end, because some vases and vases and compote vases, we couldn't get in because of supply.
You know what? You brought up such an interesting point. And it's so interesting. Like every industry, and this is why we do this podcast, right? Because you're hearing it right from the industry insiders. Were unveiling our, behind the scenes for you. So it's funny because I know for photography, there's certain things, the common question that I get that most people haven't thought of, right? For you, it's interesting because you just said that you ask a couple, well, how would they want their flowers presented? And they're like, oh, I don't know, because they're sitting there and they're looking at the florals, right? But they're actually not looking at the entire piece and how it's put together and the actual item it's in. I didn't even think about that, Mia. That is such a great tip. So for our listeners.
And most people don't, it just doesn't cross your mind, and there's no fault to you for that. It's just the fact that it's just one of those where you're like, right. I didn't even think about that. Right. Now you have to, the cost also, now that leads into, cuts out your cost of your flowers as well, because of what you're going to put your flowers in is also taking up some of your budget, because some of those compote vases can go $30 a piece.
Right. So for our listeners, if you are looking at arrangements or centerpieces or bouquets, see how they're installed. See what's wrapped around the bouquet. Do they have ribbon? Is it a wreath? If it's an altar, see what it's in. That is a great tip for them to
right. I mean, and that also takes into your budget as well. So, it could be an extra $500 out of your budget that's coming out just for what you're, the container and what you choose and what you're picking out. So that's another question, and is how do you want to display your florals, especially if you're going to get risers. Do you want hurricane lights around your floor on your tables, because that's taking into your design budget as well.
What about once they hire you as their florist? What is the best case scenario of how you can collaborate with them? What would you prefer to see happen once they hire you?
Well, I always ask them to send me a lot of brides and couples. They'll have have a Pinterest board already. So I'll tell them, you've already saw images in your head that you love. Shoot them over to me so I can look at them. So if you have a Pinterest board, send it over to me. I always tell people, you're not bothering me with the pictures. In fact, I enjoy the more pictures that you of your vision that you can like send me your vision board, because then I can get to know exactly what it is you're looking for. So I don't get aggravated with a bunch of pictures getting thrown my way. I even tell my people, if you want to just text me one that day and I'll just shoot it to myself. Let me look at it, because that, I want to get to know what you like, what your do's and don'ts are. And some people, how they're explaining something might not be what their vision is. They'll say, "Oh, I want this," but when they go to show you the picture, it's not any. They just don't know how to explain themselves.
Speaking of pictures, what are you seeing for trends right now that a lot of your couples are asking you to do?
It's been going all over the place. Boho bohemian colors were the rage last year. I couldn't get away from it. And I've had a few people still going into the bohemian color combo. And now that magenta is the new color out. But I haven't seen people request that yet. But I think that will be beautiful. But nobody's really requested it. Weddings, they're still sticking to those light muted. I mean, your traditionals are still sticking to those light muted colors, which are the classic. I mean, it's classic. It's classic color. And then again, it depends on what season they're at. If it's fall, they want fall colors. If it's spring, they're going springy, muted. Some go trendy with the new magenta, but I haven't had a request for that yet. I think it's all over the map. It's right now. Have you seen anything with your brides?
So it's interesting you say that. So obviously the bohemian, the darker way, at least in my industry, like the darker editing, the bohemian styles, the bohemian colors, those were kind of going on during the COVID years. And now that we're kind of getting out of COVID, I am starting to see a shift in color. I am starting to see a lot of the emeralds, a lot of the ruby tones starting to happen. And obviously, like you said, you will always have the classics. There's a reason why they're the classics. They're traditional. They're just beautiful,
Yeah, they're beautiful.
Mia, what's interesting is we're sharing little tips about what's out there that we're seeing for colors and trends. But how about for our listeners? I mean, we talked a little bit about the visuals, right? They want to see these certain flowers in their arrangements. They want to see certain arrangements. Let's talk a little bit about what our listeners don't see. So they come to you, they hire you, or they hire a florist. What happens from the time that they talk with you until their wedding day, getting their florals there?
So they don't see that your florist is stressed out. You don't see that we're pulling our hair out. You don't see that we want to make the day spectacular for you, and we're making sure. And to do that, we're even if we've done it 100 times over, every time we do a wedding, we're still sweating with you. So, because we want everything perfect for you. So the day that goes in, we're designing ahead of time. We're making sure that the product that we got in is quality product. We're making sure, because let's face it, if I'm shipping in some flowers, there's been instances where I've had a bunch of roses came in and that they were wilted, and I'm freaking out, and I have to go grab some other flowers, and it's no fault to the distributor. Just stuff happens, things happen. You're not seeing that we have to deliver the flowers to you, and then we have to set up your installs. So I'm working with the vendors at the vendor that you chose. And if you have a wedding planner who's there, sometimes they're there and sometimes they're not, because they won't get there sometimes for the florals. Let's talk about, my sister just was recently married, and I went to this we went to the reception, and I was there early, and of course I was stressing out because here's my sister's wedding, and we did all the flowers, and she was my typical bridezilla because she's my sister.
They do tell you, Mia, to not work for family. That was like lesson 101.
Yeah, I mean, of course it was, my sister, where she said, whatever you do is fine, where that's not true. She's gonna give me a hard time. But when I got there, you always want to double check your work, and I she had these gorgeous pillars, and there was some gorgeous vases, um, cement vases that were there because she was going to be married outside. And instead of being married in under an arch, I said, why don't we take these vases and we'll put gorgeous cascades up in them. And I, as your florist, we can make mistakes, and lesson learned that one thing you need to double measure everything. So I had to make these gorgeous arrangements, probably they were about 20, I would say about 5 feet wide, and they were probably about 8 feet high in the air. I had to get them up. And I mean, I'm 5 feet tall, so imagine that. And they probably weighed about 50 pounds each, because now they're filled with floral foam and water. And, oh. So my sister said to me, so this is something that I have to double check. And it's not because what you're telling me that someone's telling you. It's just that I've learned I need to just kind of nicely kind of double check. I was told, there's the landscape crew is there, and they're going to be there to help you, and everyone's going to be there to help you. I said, oh, that's okay, great. So do I need a ladder? You don't need a ladder. Are you sure I don't need a ladder? Don't need a ladder. You don't need anything. I said, okay. So me and some of my crew, we go there. I look where they must have had a wedding the night before. So last minute they were taking down a tent. The aisle that my sister was going to walk down, that rose petals were supposed to be spread out. I had to find a rake. So now I'm raking the grass because it was a disaster. So now not only I have 2 vans filled with florals. Now I'm running around trying to find a rake. No one's no one's there to help me. Finally, they come out with this rake. It looks like a 5-year-old sand rake for the sand. I'm like, are you kidding? I'm like, okay, all right. So it all came into place. I mean, but there's things that happen that, as your designer, and Sarah, as being your photographer, there's things that you don't know that happen that you don't know. And if you're professional enough, you get it done, and you get it done. Nobody knows anything that happened, but you're sweating when it's happening.
Well, that's what you say. It's like, for me, I've been in this industry for 20 years. I can write a book, like, with all my stories. It's like you said, it doesn't matter how many weddings you do. It's the first time doing their wedding, right?
Yeah.
So
everyone's important, and every detail is down to, and that comes into your bride it's not their job to worry about that. It's our job to worry about that. But every detail has to be planned out in our heads and down, and know exactly what it is that we're going into and what we have to do. It's not their job to worry about us getting your final show. Because when you walk out, we want you to be amazed and just love everything that we did. And we just, when my sister came out, and she was like in awe, like, I could tell just from her expression, she loved it, which made me feel good, because I'm there, because usually I'm not at your wedding to see your expression when you walk out.
What though, Mia, it's kind of one of those things though that it's there. And I'm only laughing because it's just a fun industry. It's just a fun industry. And every wedding is different. But for me, and for you, like, I do this every weekend, all weekend long, but every day is different, right?
Right.
And you got to make sure that
you have fun and you enjoy it.
You have fun and enjoy it. So if that means you got to take like a sand rake and start raking the aisle that your sister's going down, like, you just have to make sure you hire the team that's going to actually do that. Like, with everything, it's
right.
like.
So we were like, oh, the worst I didn't tell you. So these 5 feet wide arrangements that weigh about over 50 pounds, which I have no ladder. So the event coordinator, he comes on the site. Now he's like 6'2", and I said, so I had to ask him, can you please help us, because I have to raise them up on these stone pillars, on these concrete vases with lions cut out. I mean, it was magnificent, but I can't. It's taken a few people to get that up there. So he's helping us. Thankfully, I know enough, and this is something your floral designer, a good floral designer, would know, and why you want a difference is I knew enough that you have to completely wrap the foam in this plate, because if you don't, anything can happen. It can shift. He helps us put it up, and he misses the mark and it tips sideways into the vase. So I have probably about 150 roses in this one piece, and it tips sideways into the vase because my heart, I thought I was going to die right then and there. I'm like, oh! But thankfully I secured it enough that it didn't shift and it didn't move and it didn't break any stems. But I mean that I get heart palpitations just thinking about that.
Well, no deed goes unpunished there, Mia,
Yeah, but I mean, but so these are the things. I mean, like let's face it. You're event coordinator, you're photographer, you're florist. There's all things that go on that that we're like, oh. But if you have a professional working with you that's been through these ropes and knows that these things happen, and you're prepared, like last month we were on an event, and one of our employees, we were putting out vases, and she dropped one and broke one. But that's okay, because I have an extra one. So while she's panicking, and I'm sorry, like, don't worry about it, because I have flowers in the van. I have a container for spare. I know that these things can happen, because this is what happens, and you're okay.
I'll share a quick little story before our wrap-up question with you. Dan and I were actually photographing a wedding, and it was indoors, and the designer at the time, they were setting up all, like you said, vases, right? And in the center aisle. And normally they leave room where the guest will walk into the aisle to take a seat. But this particular couple obviously had this vision where they just wanted, I could see what they wanted. They just wanted beautiful vases with candles all down the aisles. So it didn't leave any room for guests to walk in through the aisleway, only on the sides, which is fine, right? In thought, in theory, but in execution, it's not, because people don't understand that they only have one way to enter. They're just used to kind of going down the aisle and entering, right? And also, too, people who sit down, they're sitting down, and then, it's kind of like an airplane, right? You only have so much leg movement. So with these vases on the left, you can't move your leg to the left. And if you do, what happens, right? It crashes and breaks, right?
Right.
So I'm not even kidding. I'm sitting at the altar. It looks beautiful. But execution-wise, it was kind of
practical.
Yeah. And you just hear burst, burst, burst. I know. There was probably maybe 6 or 7 vases that bursted as we were waiting. The music is playing, and my heart was sinking. But you know what? Listen, it's a wedding. People are happy. They're happy to be there, and it became a joke because we're like, "What's the next one that's gonna burst?" So luckily, though, like you said, people come prepared. There's extra vases, and so they came in. They replaced the vases. They mopped it all up, and they spread the vases out before she even came down the aisle. But let me tell you, I'm sitting up there as a photographer. Music's playing. Everybody's waiting to see her, and it's burst, burst.
That's the other thing. People have to think of allergies.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Allergies. Now, your mom, your mother's afraid is allergic to lilies. You don't want lilies in your arrangements.
Didn't even think about
sometimes
that.
People don't think about allergies. And you're going to put, what are you putting in the middle? Not saying you have to ask every guest what they're allergic to. I mean, the most of the guests, if you're there, if they're highly, highly allergic, they're going to pretty much tell you, or they just move it out of the way. But that's another key. If you're a bride and you're allergic to a certain flower, you want to tell your florist that, because sometimes we put in filler that you might not know about, just because it makes the piece look pretty. And if you're highly allergic to it, chamomile, if you're allergic to chamomile and I'm using it as some filler and I don't know that, and this is your bridal bouquet, do you really want me to put that in there?
That's a good
So
tip.
If you have an allergy,
so
if you have an allergy, you should really, tell your designer. Which leads me into another mess too, is candles. Can you have candles? Even though that's on the event planning side, they'll say, I want candles on the tables with these flowers, and I'll ask first, that's great, but can you have candles? You need to ask, because to me, sometimes that go to your arrangements, and some venues don't want live lit candles.
Correct. So those are great.
You might have to buy the candles. Now don't forget, that's going to go into your budget on how many candles that you need to buy. Flameless candles. That's another part of your budget that people don't think about.
That's a great tip. And also, too, there are some venues that do allow candles, but they have to be a certain way that it's submerged in water.
Right.
So obviously, talking with your florist, talking about the vision, and then just trusting your florist, and the florist is going to let you know. They're going to give you some homework, right, to go back to the venue and ask this, and this. And some florists will know, if you're getting married at a certain venue.
They already know the venue.
They already know. And also, too, exactly. Like you said, I mean, I see florists all the time. If you're getting married on the water, they have fishing twine and all this. You guys just come with this stuff. And I'm like, what are you doing? You're like, I'm securing the vase down. I'm like, why? They're like, because the wind's about to blow. And again, these are all things that, as a listener or someone who's not doing this for a living doesn't know. But that.
Right. So we come with the toolbox. I mean, the van's equipped with the toolbox. I call it our toolbox. I come with buckets of extra loose flowers in case one breaks on the transport, in case one breaks in the wait staff while they're setting up. They something happened. I mean, we come with our toolbox because of the fact that we have to secure. Like you're right. I mean, we come with pins for your boutonniere, because sometimes they lose the pin, and then everybody's running around, and I could give you a pin in your boutonniere and say, here's your boutonniere, and then you lost it in last minute, so I'll stick a few extra in there and just say, just because you never know. There's so many little details about it. The installs are huge, because that takes time, especially if you're going to tell me that your cousin is going to build me an arbor. I've had that. Okay. Cousin Steve's building me an arbor, and you get there and it's made out of coat hanger, pretty much. Like, okay, we have a problem, because you're not considering on how much each spray weighs, that I now need to zip tie to Cousin Steve's arbor made out of coat hanger. Like, it's not working. Dimensions. If I try to go out to the venue, if there's a venue or no. I mean, some of the event planners that when you're working at a venue, that who they are, so you can call them up and say, hi Sarah, it's me. Can you tell me what's the dimension of that arbor? And they're pretty much on it, because they have it written down and they have the right dimensions. But if it's somebody that I haven't worked with yet, sometimes I'll like to take a ride out there just to measure things myself, because one little measurement and you're off. You don't like my sister, her whole arrangement tipped upside down because he moved it back a couple inches. So your measurement matters. Your height of a pew, if you want standing florals, where do you want it to? Do you want it in the middle of the pew? Do you want it lower? These things matter. So you need to know that. How many aisles of rows? So they'll say, some brides, they'll say, oh, I want florals at the end of each pew. Okay, well, how many pews are there? Because I need to know that. How many are we going down? Oh, I don't know. Well, we need to get that because now I need to, because that goes into your cost. And how many do we need? Do we need 20? Is there 10 on each side? How many do we need? So these are questions that you might not think of, but that's the questions I'm going to ask you after we secure it. And then once I have all the measurements, and if it's something that I can grab on my own, I don't bother you to grab the question. Usually I'll just go and call up and ask for myself, because it's really, I don't bother the bride, as little as possible. Because once I'm ready to launch and I have my plan down, because I'll plan it out on paper. Once I have that set up, I just double check my dimensions, my measurements, my pews, how many tables. The other thing, quick, you can't change color a month before your wedding.
So that is a nice little tidbit. That is something that I hear a lot. People change color a lot, like when they're, and a lot of times it happens in their invitations, right? Like they start looking at their invitations and then they see all these other things and they want to just quickly change something because they see another trend. Because a lot of times, you all who are listening, you're planning your wedding a year to 2 years out. So obviously things change, right? So you're right. You got to commit to the color palette.
They're like, oh, I just went from magenta to citrus. What? I already secured those flowers. That they're already secured. We already ordered them to secured. Like a month. I'm sorry, I can't. You can't. There's no color change a month out. Or once those, or the flowers that if I have to supplement throughout the farm, or if I have to supplement, I've already put in my order for you, because some of these have to be pre-ordered. So I've pre-ordered. It's not like I'm going to distribute that day and saying, give me what you got. I'm putting in an order. I'm placing an order for you. So that order has already been placed with the distributor on how many roses I need, how much filler I need. That's already been placed. So you can't cut that out. Because it's already done. It's already been executed. You're already in line, because we are planning a month ahead for your wedding. If it's a simple change, that's fine. But there's some color changes. No, sorry, because at that point, it's already been ordered.
Well, that's a great tip, and you left our listeners with a lot of tips. I do want to say that is a great takeaway. There is a lot that happens behind the scenes, and that is one of the reasons why you all are listening, because you're trying to absorb and just take as much knowledge as possible. Leave it to the professionals. Trust us. But you are right. Sometimes people may not understand why they can't change things at a certain timeline. And that is why there's really good contracts, because it's not that we're all trying to, be difficult. We always want to work with you, but there's things that happen behind the scenes that are executed to prepare for your day without you knowing. And so, like you said, for you ordered your flowers. I know for me, like within 30 days, you can't change because I'm already ordering albums, or we're already lining up staff and we're getting things ready. So it's just a matter of just talking, communicating, and understanding who you're hiring and working with them. And you gave them a lot of pointers to take away, which now leads us into our wrap-up question. What are some key points that couples should be asking their floral farmer when they are inquiring to make sure that they are working with a professional company to ensure that their wedding day is a perfect event?
Well, the first one, Sarah, would be not all flower farmers are floral farmer designers. So your first question is to make sure that they are a designer as well, and they're just not a grower. Your second one is to ask them, are they able to grow a certain flower for you if requested for your wedding, and in what month? And if something happens, are they able to get flowers? Because again, if you're a flower farmer and you don't have that supply chain behind you, what happens if storm comes and knocks out your crop? Are you able to get me flowers? That would be a huge question I would ask. And the third I would ask is, what's your minimum wedding that you'll take? What's the minimum budget that you'll take? Because some people won't, because we get in wedding inquiries all the time. So what's the minimum budget that you'll take? And is there a security deposit? I'm giving you 4. Well, because we take a security deposit because we have to hold your date. That's huge. And any professional is going to ask for a security deposit to hold your date, because you could say, I want you to do my wedding on May 30th, but May 30th before May 30th you cancel, and I just told 2 other brides or 1 other bride that we can't handle their wedding because I already promised it. So we do ask for a non-refundable deposit. And then ask them what their contract is. Ask them what happens. I mean, up to what time can they? I'm going more than 3 points.
No, that's okay. Hey, knowledge is power.
I would ask them what's their cancellation policy. Even though I know you're in love with John, but some things could happen. You could have to cancel for a family emergency. What's the cancellation policy? I would ask them. Obviously, the deposit to hold the date usually is non-refundable. Mine is non-refundable just because I could be missing out on another wedding. And do they deliver, and what's the delivery charge and setup fees? Because they do charge delivery, because depending on how far out were you willing to travel. Are they willing to go to the venue for your wedding? I think those are a start on what you should ask.
Well, those are some wonderful tips, Mia. Thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode of Wedding Secrets Unveiled. You helped our listeners become one step closer to their stress-free wedding planning. Can you tell everybody where they could find you?
Sure. You can visit me at milliesflowerfarm.com. I'm located in Coventry, Rhode Island. Or you could call me on my phone at 401-204-8280. Or you can find me on Instagram at Millie's Flower Farm and Facebook at Millie's Flower Farm. And if you have a question that you just want to shoot out, and you don't need to hire me, but you just have a quick question, or you don't quite understand, or there's something that you need, I'm more than happy to help. Just shoot me, holla, and I'll be more than happy to give you some answers if I have them. And if I can't, I'll try to find it for you. But I don't mind, consultation. And the consultation's always free, obviously.
Yeah, and what I'll do for our listeners is I will have Mia's information on our episode show notes, which you can find on our blog and our website page, on our podcast page, which is sarahzarella.com/podcast. So thank you, Mia, so much for joining me on this week's episode. And for
we actually have a wedding coming up together soon.
We do. We absolutely do. And what I'll do is I'll put some pictures from that wedding on the show notes. And for our listeners, Mia said, give her a call. Ask her a question. She's there for you.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Mia.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Wedding Secrets Unveiled. I appreciate you being here. And hey, if you enjoyed this episode, I want to tell you something. I encourage you to check out our website at sarahzarella.com. We love photographing while having fun, of course. Check out our podcast page on our website for our show notes, along with upcoming episodes with your local wedding experts. Listen in as we help you plan your epic event. And don't forget that you can actually subscribe to this podcast wherever you are listening so you never miss an episode. I would so appreciate if you left a review for us on Apple Podcasts. Even better, share it with a friend. It's a great way to show your support, and let us know what you think. If you know any wedding experts that would like to be a guest, we have a link directly on our website where they can let us know. Thank you for listening.